Well, hello, good afternoon. It is Friday, September, Friday, September the 7th. A week into September. I'm right at the end of the final week of my vacation. My name is Adam Olsen. I'm the MLA for Saanich North in the Islands. Thank you very much for joining this, the 24th episode of the Public Circle Live. It's 24 episodes. I remember, it's probably about 30 weeks now because I've missed a few weeks, but 30 weeks ago, I said to my Chief of Staff, Aldous Spurl, I want to do this Facebook Live. He said, you got to make sure that you hit it every week. You got to be there. You say you're going to be there. You got to be there. This is episode number 24. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. If you're watching the rebroadcast of this episode, thank you very much for joining us there at a later date, whether it be on YouTube or if you're catching this episode on Facebook. Today, I am flying solo, as you can see. I do like to have other people with me. Last week, I had a wonderful interview with Barb Whittington about co-housing. The week before that, I had a great conversation with my partner, my wife, Emily Olsen. We talked about life in politics. I'm going to kind of revisit that a little bit today. I'm going to be talking about life in politics for 10 years. It was 10 years ago that I was first elected to Central Saanich Council. And November of 2008, when I first was elected, and it is surreal to be looking back and thinking, my goodness, that has been 10 years already. And I've got a son who reminds me every day of those 10 years because he was 1 year old when I got elected, just 11 months, I guess, old when I got elected. And so he's going to be 11 this December, and he's now at Bayside, and we started the first week of school. Ella is back at the tribal school, Lewanuk School, in the grade 1 St. Jonathan immersion program, something that I've talked about quite a bit, something that I'm very, very proud of, the fact that she is going through that program. And Silas is at Bayside, I have a middle schooler. And so we were away last week on Hornby Island for a week, enjoying the family, and then this week we were just getting the kids back to school. So I am at the end of my holidays getting ready for the summer session. Next week I'm going to be at a Wild Salmon Advisory Council meeting on Monday, and then to Whistler for the Union of BC Municipalities convention, which is always kind of a weird convention in an election year, but nonetheless there is. So I want to acknowledge, as I look out the window from my kitchen table, that there's rain. And I think that the rain has been very, very welcome. I feel that it's very welcome. I'm welcoming the rain. I don't know about you. But I'm very, very happy that there is rain. It's something that's been long needed in our province, as we've had an unprecedented two emergency, what are they called? A declaration of emergency. Anyway, you know what I mean. That was just called off today. We are no longer in a state of emergency. That's what it's called. It was just called off today. I got an email saying no more state of emergency, but we've had two of those this summer from the wildfire issues that we've had and faced this summer. Been dramatic impacts on people across the province, dramatic impacts on people in the Saanich North and the islands, as I've been talking about the impact of having smoky skies blanketing us, smoke covering us for weeks on end. I was up in Kamloops. The psychological impacts of that smoke was pretty big, and it was impacting people right across the province. I can't imagine the people who lived in and around or were evacuated this summer because of those fires. And my heart goes out to those that have been negatively impacted by the fires, including the smoke, but more than that, people who were evacuated. My father-in-law was one of them. So today, I want to talk about 10 years in politics, 10 years in governance, actually. So we often talk a lot about politics, but what we don't often talk a lot about is governance. And I know that, I might be playing with the words here a little bit. I might be messing the actual definitions of these words up a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit about the difference, or at least the perceived difference that I have of politics and governance. There's an awful lot of politics. We see it every day play out here on social media and Facebook. We see the politics down in the States. We see the politics here. The ongoing and seemingly constant battle between partisans and parties, political parties, and the politics around certain decisions being made for the benefit of politicians and political parties. And then we actually talk about governing communities and the decisions that need to be made to govern a province are often not the ones that are made in a political system like ours, where you have a first past the post system, but where and in a first past the post system where you lean pretty heavily on politics and the optics of a decision rather than good public policy being made. And so I look back to 10 years ago when I got elected as a councillor in the District of Central Saanich, and I have to say that we spent a lot more time at that level, at the local government level, I believe, governing. While there was politics, and during local elections, there certainly is politics. The council table, where there's 7 individuals, a mayor and 6 councillors, or a mayor and 8 councillors, depending on the size of your community, or a mayor and 4 councillors, depending on the size of your community, depends on the size of your council. Nonetheless, the point that I'm trying to make is that at the local government level, you spend a lot more time making decisions, and while they sometimes lean towards the politics, most of the time they're about governing a community, making decisions about how to allocate property taxes, making decisions about developments and land use and zoning and rezoning and density and land use decisions. Hopefully about transportation planning and where our communities are, the residential neighborhoods, and where the commercial centers are, and how those nodes are connected with each other. That's the decision making that's done at the local government level. And as you may or may not have noticed, depending on what community you live in, there are political signs already up as the nomination period officially opened following the Labor Day weekend for the 2018 municipal election. I do note there are 1 or 2 signs already up in Saanich North and the Islands. Our friends to the south in Saanich, the District of Saanich, seem to be going full bore already with signs up. Seems a little bit early, perhaps. They'll be up for more than a month and a half in Saanich. I see a couple of signs up in North Saanich, and for the most part, the signage wars, or the signage contests, let's just put it that way, a more pleasant way than the signage wars, haven't really started in Saanich North and the Islands. In the 3 municipalities and the Islands Trust areas and the CRD areas in Saanich North and the Islands, we don't see any of those signs up just yet, but don't hold your breath. They'll be up soon. They will be up soon, that's for sure. You'll get to see who your candidates are. And I do, and when I got elected as a MLA, and let's go back to when I stepped down as a councillor in Central Saanich back in 2013 to run in the 2013 election that I was unsuccessful in. I made a commitment to never forget my time in local government. I was stepping away from the council table because I was impacted by some of the decisions that were being made. In fact, many of the decisions that were being made at the provincial government level. And I wanted to become an MLA because I felt like it was important to go and change some of those things that I felt were holding us back at the community level, that were perhaps unfair, or that maybe we could do better if the provincial government was more of a partner rather than as a parent. Which is the way it often feels when you're in local government. And for those of you who are incumbents, I think you'll know exactly what I'm saying. And for those of you who are new and haven't had the experience at the council table, this is something that you'll learn over the coming weeks, months, and years should you become elected in your communities, is that the relationship between the provincial government, the level of government that I represent, and the local government is not always the most productive. Nor is it always necessarily the most friendly. There are lots of issues that come up at the Union of BC Municipalities Convention, which is happening next week, as I mentioned, where the municipalities from across the province come together. We'll be in Whistler this year, where we come together and meet with the provincial government. And it was always this convention, and I'll be doing a Facebook Live from the UBCM next week. It might be a little bit earlier. It could be on Thursday. I'm not sure exactly. Might have to change it for next week. But anyways, I'll be doing a Facebook Live from there as we and reporting out on what I'm hearing from the municipal councils and the municipal councillors, what the mayors and councillors are saying that they want the provincial government to do. But I always remember the times and the experiences from the Union of BC Municipalities where we would go there with our needs. We would go to meet with the government ministers, the provincial government ministers, with the needs for our community, and they never seemed to align with the priorities of the provincial government. One year when we were building the Central Saanich Fire Hall, the new fire hall on Keating, we went to the UBCM and the Premier was announcing investments in parks. And now the town of Sidney is building a new fire hall. You know, we're going to go to the UBCM convention and we're going to hear the Premier, and we're going to hear the Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister Selena Robinson announce their priorities. And it's not very often that, or it seemingly wasn't very often anyway, that the priorities of the provincial government and the priorities of the local governments aligned. And again, this comes back to this idea of politics and governance. It always felt, and it still does to a certain extent, as an MLA, that the provincial government priorities are what is more important than perhaps what the local government priorities are. There's got to be numbers of municipalities across the provinces that are building or in the need of building fire halls. Rather than having granting programs that are focused on the politics, the provincial politics that seemingly benefit the political parties in the provincial political sphere, what we need are programs that actually help municipalities achieve their priorities. Every year they do strategic plans. And so, you know, this is a pitch. This is a reminder for me that as I left local government to become an MLA, this is a reminder for me to that pledge, that promise that I made as I was leaving the seat, to never forget the experience that I had around the council table, to never forget the experience that the citizens of Central Saanich gave me as their councillor, and now as their MLA, to try to make a difference, on the decisions that the now and the incoming, the new mayor and council, whatever that looks like, will be making. So I just wanted to reiterate that I have not forgotten that commitment, that pledge that I made to, no matter the reality that I am a provincial MLA that represents 3 municipalities, 4 First Nations, and 5 Southern Gulf Islands, 5 major ones, a lot more, many more smaller ones, including Piers Island. I never forget you, Piers. And Sidney Island. I never forget those on Sidney Island either. Shout out to Piers and Sidney Island. So anyways, I have not forgotten, and I will not forget. When I go to the Union of BC Municipalities Convention this week, I will be reminded once again of the work that we have to do. And as the critic, municipal affairs and housing, and the critic of transportation, I recognize and acknowledge the considerable work that we have to do at the provincial level in showing leadership, the leadership that's needed at the provincial level to support our municipalities and to support good planning processes, integrated planning processes, where the development of our communities are integrated with each other and the planning processes are connected by transportation infrastructure that makes sense, and that we're not just developing for the sake of developing, but we're developing in a coordinated way, that our interactions with each other are competent, that our interactions with each other are integrated. I think it's critically important that we do at the provincial level a much better job at showing leadership than we have over the past decade that I've been in local government. I know it's been going on a lot longer than that. In fact, there's still some issues that I was dealing with at the local government level when I got elected to Central Saanich that are still creeping along. One of those issues is the management, the proper management of the bays and inlets and the waterways around our municipalities. Speaking of it from a Central Saanich perspective, because there's an application out, but from the Islands Trust and the Gulf Islands, as I go out there and see the boats and the issues that are created by a lack of coordination between government levels. So I just thought that I would reiterate that, be very clear on that. I'm going to answer. I got a message from Allison. Have you ever tried to decide? Have you ever had to decide on any issue on an urgent basis, and how would an urgent issue be dealt with? Suddenly a homeless population showed up in a municipality where there was previously none. Look, these social issues, have I ever? Well, I would say the answer to the question is yes, and I have had those situations. I've had a few of them. They're very challenging. They challenge us, the decision makers, right at the core of who we are. They challenge us, the values, the principles. I'm just trying to formulate on the fly a good, solid answer here, because there actually isn't one. It is probably the most difficult part of the work, and it's something that the local government, the people that are putting their names forward to be mayors and councillors in the upcoming election, have to be wary of, is that they will be challenged in the most fundamental ways with issues just like this. The homelessness issues, the housing affordability issues in our communities, not just here in the Capital Regional District, here in Saanich North and the Islands, but right across our province, are acute. And they've taken a number of years, decade and a half to evolve. In many respects, we had a provincial government, the former provincial government, and this is to a large reason why I made the decision last summer that we needed to change government, was because the former provincial government took their hands off the wheel. They became reliant on the money that was being generated unsustainably by a real estate industry, the money being generated by real estate transactions. They became reliant on that when other plans like LNG fell through, and they created a scenario that we're dealing with. So when you talk about the situation about a homeless population, those homeless populations that show up in municipalities that local governments have to deal with are often due to other levels of government, in this case the provincial government, not doing its job. And this situation, this particular one, has evolved over a number of years, over a decade and more than a decade, and there's not easy solutions to them. The solutions take time. They are as controversial and as complex as any that we're going to face in our society, and they're going to impact people. I mean, let's just be honest about the situation that we have to face. We've got people in our friends, family, neighbors that are struggling right now, and that have been struggling, and that the decisions that are going to be made to help them are going to impact other people, and that there's almost no way to get around that. And so it is difficult. They are challenging, and each situation needs to be handled sensitively and in a compassionate way, and in with the unique circumstances that they exist under. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Saanich North and the Islands for the final 10 minutes or 11 minutes of this live broadcast today, because I want to talk about how, as a municipal councillor, I perhaps had one perspective, and how that perspective has evolved as I became the MLA and as I started to have to take a look at a broader region than just a single district. When I was a councillor in Central Saanich, I looked at Central Saanich, and as an extension, Central Saanich in the context of a broader region with neighbors. But for the most part, the decisions that were made on Monday nights were ones that were made about and for Central Saanich. And we did think about it in the context of, okay, we've got neighbors and we've got a region that we have to deal with. But not as much as I have to now. I'm now responsible for a geographical area that basically starts just south of Bakerview Dental Clinic on the highway, just north of Elk Lake. It includes the whole Saanich Peninsula, and it includes basically the heart, the center of the Salish Sea. And so my perspective has evolved about what the needs are for those 7 communities on the Saanich Peninsula and half dozen communities in the Salish Sea. I have to look at how these communities are working together, how they're supporting one another, how they're connected with each other. I have to think about how they are developing, how they're dealing with growth. I have to have a deeper understanding of, and I think we have to have a deeper understanding of how they're connected by transportation infrastructure, some of which is the responsibility of the local government and some of which is the responsibility of the provincial government. When you take a look at transportation infrastructure on the southern Gulf Islands in Salt Spring, that is entirely under the purview of the province. On the Saanich Peninsula, it's a mixture. It's a mishmash. This West Saanich Road and Highway 17, the Pat Bay Highway, are provincial, and virtually most of the rest of the roads are municipally owned roads and maintained roads. And then there's the services like BC Ferries, this semi-corporate structure, private, this evolved ferry structure, and BC Transit, which provides some of the other transportation services to the people in Saanich North and the islands. It becomes far more complex, and my perspective, I guess, comes up to a 30,000 foot view, and I look down and I have to admit, and I have to say, that while each of the communities that I represent, whether it be Central Saanich, North Saanich, Sidney, Sartlip, Sayout, Sachem, Pawquetchin, Salt Springs, Saturna, Galliano, Maine, Pender, and Saturna, I think I got all you, didn't I? Sidney, Piers. As I'm looking at all these communities, the borders are blurring. The borders are blurred. I know where the agricultural lands are. You can see them. I know where the parklands are. You can kind of see them. I know where the residential lands are. I can see them. I know where the commercial servicing area is. That's Sidney. And I start to view Saanich North and the islands as perhaps it was viewed by my ancestors over the past hundreds of years, thousands of years, as Saanich, as that one geographic place, the Saanich Peninsula and the southern Gulf Islands in the heart of the Salish Sea has always been one social, economic, and eco or environmental unit. And we think about how it is that these communities can be better coordinated, better integrated, work more closely together, be better connected with services, the transportation services, ferry or bus, passenger ferries included in that, and how we can be much, much more efficiently planned as we go forward from here. You know that there's planning processes that are underway now in the near future as official community plans start to come up. And so how do we include those conversations or how do we make sure those conversations include better integration so that when BC Transit is planning its future routes, it can look at certain areas and say, well, we're going to put transportation infrastructure there, on the Pat Bay or on West Saanich or on East Saanich Road, because we know that the communities are committed over a long term to densities there, or they're committed to controlling growth and putting it in specific areas. We see that growth that's happening, and arguably, in Sidney, there's a lot of conversation about the growth that's happening. I'm well aware of the debate that's going on in Sidney right now around the growth that's happening in Sidney, and the role. What role does Sidney play in the future of the Saanich Peninsula? And it needs to be said, what role does Sidney play in the future of the Southern Gulf Islands as the service area? You know, I said this during the election, and I'll continue to reiterate it. I don't have the benefit now, as some of the municipal, the mayors and councillors that are going to be elected, of seeing the borders. I understand and recognize the unique communities that are defined by those borders. But as the MLA, I take a look at our riding and say, how can we work together to support each other to create a broader 50,000 person community that has the things that communities need on the Saanich Peninsula and the Southern Gulf Islands, so that we don't have to go too much farther outside the borders of the geographic area that I represent. How do we ensure that people in Central Saanich head north to Sidney to have the services that they need, whether it be professional services like a doctor or that's a whole other can of worms, a dentist, a specialist, physiotherapist, chiropractors. How do we ensure lawyers, accountants, dentists, like the two dentists that are in the office building where my office is? How do those services and how do those services also provide? How do those professionals provide service to the people in the Southern Gulf Islands as well? And how do we ensure that they have easy access to Sidney, as it has been over the last number of years and continues to be aside from some other smaller commercial centers like we see in Brentwood Bay and in Saanich and in Ganges and in other places around the riding, how does it continue to be and evolve and continue to provide the services that the people of Saanich North and the islands need? And so I think that it's important for me as the representative of the MLA to acknowledge the fact that forever, for hundreds of years, the Saanich Peninsula has needed the Gulf Islands, and the Gulf Islands has needed the Saanich Peninsula. And this is not to take away the beauty and unique nature of the various communities and the diversity of communities that we have in the riding, but it's to say, how does that diversity of the cultural diversity, the economic diversity of the riding, the social diversity of our riding, how are we working together in order to create an inclusive and comprehensive community overall? And that is where I think that's where my role is as an MLA, as I'm looking at the types of services that a provincial government delivers to its citizens, whether it be the overall housing or transportation services, whether it be educational services with School District 63 and 64, again with BC Ferries and BC Transit, and we're looking at the economic policies that are created in jobs, trades, or tourism policies in tourism and culture and the arts and sport and the arts. So as we're looking at the services that those ministries deliver, that's the role that I have, is to say, how does this best suit the needs of the people of Saanich North and the islands? And so over the last number of months since I was elected, I spent a lot of time with the elected, whether it be on the Gulf Islands, the islands trustees, and the CRD directors, or here on the Saanich Peninsula, the mayors and councillors, who are all up for election. Every seat on the Saanich Peninsula is open now for election, and some are running again as incumbents, while others have decided to retire. And it's at this point that I'd like to say and raise my hands in thankfulness to those who have dedicated their time at the table representing their communities. It's not an easy job. And I know that it's always a hazard to start naming names, but I'm going to name some of those names. And for those that I have missed, or that I miss, I'm sorry. But I do want to acknowledge and raise my hands to the mayor of the current mayor and the outgoing mayor of North Saanich, Alice Finnell. We've been around the table together for a long time, Alice, and I'd like to thank you for the service that you've gave to your community. I'd like to thank Tim Chad and Mervyn Laher-Goody, who Mervyn and I both got elected, I think, for the first time in 2008. We've sat around the table together, and Tim, Councillor Chad, thank you for your service, not just in the last few terms, but over quite a long period of time with your community. I'd like to thank George Grams, and these are just the people that I know. That at least maybe I'm out of school here, talking out of school, but nonetheless, I'd like to thank those folks for their service to the communities, and for all of you that I didn't mention that are deciding to or going to decide that you're not going to run again. Thank you for your service. And to those who are considering running, there's nothing more than you can do than provide service to your community. It's not an easy job. It's going to take a lot out of you, and it's going to require a lot from you, but it's well worth it. The feeling is good. It feels good in here to spend time around the table and make decisions and to understand the complexity. And for the people that in our communities that are starting to get tuned into the fact that we've got an election coming up, make sure that you take time to understand who your candidates are, and to ask them questions, and to push them on their perspectives, and to talk to your friends and families about getting involved in local government elections. Probably, here I am at the provincial level saying this, but there's probably no more important level of government than local government. It's the one that's much closer to you than me, although every Friday I try to get together and with you on Facebook here and have a conversation and try to stay as close as I can to a very big geographic area. So that's it for today. Did my best to try to keep this to 30 minutes. It's at 32 minutes. I see that Emily is done her meditation, and she jumped on to give me a heart. Thank you very much to Allison for your comment. Let me see what else. Do you see possible ways the municipal and provincial levels could work better or sooner together on such issues? Thanks for your interactive weekly dialogue. Yes, I do. There's lots of ways that local and provincial governments can work together. One of the things that we've done here is I've got together, and I should say, I kind of cut myself off. But I should say this. I have endeavored to, I've held one open house for all the local elected officials in Saanich North and the Islands. There's 60-something of them in Saanich North and the Islands alone. And that includes the chiefs and councils, by the way. I don't disclude? I don't exclude. You can tell it's holiday. Disclude? No, it's exclude them. You know, like they are an important part. The chiefs and councils and the First Nations communities are an important part of the community here in Saanich North and the Islands. And I think 3 or 4 times I've got together with the chiefs and the mayors, invited them for lunch, get together, have conversations. I think that can happen on a much more regular basis in ridings across the province. I know that we've got a plan that as soon as this election is over, that we are going to invite all the elected officials in Saanich North and the Islands to our office in Sidney, and we're gonna have some water and have a conversation, and have a meet and greet, and bring people together, and recognize that we are collectively the team of decision makers that has to move our riding forward, move our collective communities and our individual communities forward together, and that we are resources for each other. So the question that you're asking about if there's a way that the provincial and local governments can work better together, yeah, I think there is. And it's just by opening lines of communication. It's by being open, honest, speaking in a forthright, straight way about what's going on, and being accountable. The reality is that as you point out, the homelessness situation in our province, the provincial government has accountability for. And this government inherited a mess, and they've got a mess to sort out, and now it's their mess. And as much as we want to blame the previous government, I think that they do have some ownership on this and should take it. It's now up to this government, the BC NDP government, to fix it. and I'll do my best to try to support them in every way I can to fix it. But it's going to be creative, and it's going to be painful. It's not going to be easy, and the solutions are going to impact people. That's for sure. So anyway, thank you very much, Allison, for your comments. Thank you, Emily, my wonderful and beautiful wife, Emily, for the heart emoji that you gave me on this episode. It's very, very much appreciated. If anybody else wants to drop a heart emoji, you can, although you might have to answer to Emily. Always, every Friday, we are here live on Facebook. And here I am rambling away. I do want to shut this down now. I did want to stay under 30 minutes. It's now 36 minutes. Please like, share, love this episode. Let your friends know that I'll be here next week. Check it out. I might change the time because it's likely I'll be traveling back from the UBCM next Friday afternoon. So I might not be able to go live. Although I think I'm going to be in a car with Andrew Weaver coming back from. So maybe it will be a really shaky, really nauseating, maybe for many reasons, but at least for one, that will be in a car. Maybe what I'll do is I'll do a Facebook Live with Andrew Weaver, because I haven't had him on the Public Circle Live yet. From wherever we are, we'll pull over on the side of the road and we'll do an interview. We'll see how it plays out. But anyways, thank you very much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If you want to get a hold of us, you can. All of the details on our website. Check out our new website, Saanich North and the Islands.com. It's just a constituency website. I've separated the two. Got some events coming up on housing this 2 Saturdays from now. One in the constituency office on Saturday, September the 22nd at 11 a.m. in Sidney, and one at 4 p.m. on Saturday, September 22nd at the Salt Spring on Salt Spring Island at the Gulf Islands Secondary School. We're going to do a double-header community dialogue on housing. I've not been over to Salt Spring yet to talk housing. That's going to change. We're going to have, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I can guarantee that. I hope that you can be there. Check out all of the events on our new website at SaanichNorthAndTheIslands.com. I'll drop the link below. So thanks a lot for joining us today. And as we always say on these shows, until next week, Haekwa.